Hello and welcome to the Fat Dad Fishing Show. My name's Rich Natoli, your regular host of this show. We're going to do one that's a little bit different. It's going to be, I'm just going to give the heads up for the people on the live stream. Hopefully you're going to get to see some really cool stuff. For those that kind of struggle to find fluke spots, and I'm going to be talking specifically about the season opener, early season in the spring, but these principles apply throughout the year. So just, if you're not planning on going out until the summer, maybe summer vacation, you're down, around the 4th of July or something, this is still going to have some valuable information for you. For those that don't know, I have some experience with fluke fishing, and both offshore, or I should say out front, and inshore in the back. And I put together a flounder course years ago and got a lot of great reviews on it. So this is basically information that comes from that course, and it's just been proven time and time again. It's researched. It's not just based on my experience. I have a lot of experience, but it's based on conversations with other fishermen. It's based on actual research, reading books, doing deep dives into the biology and the behaviors of this summer flounder species. And this is actually good for summer, southern, and Gulf flounder. So, if you're fishing for any of those, this is really going to hold true, probably for many other varieties as well. But those are the ones that I'm going to say, this is legit. It works for all of them. There's just slight differences between them, not just in size and appearance, but like salinity tolerances. There are some differences there, but for the most part, what we're going to go over today is spots. I'm going to talk about how to find a spot. If you want to, in the chat, you can throw out some towns, and if I can find them real quick on the map, I can go through and give some demonstrated, I guess you would say, I can demonstrate for you, not saying this is the best spot, but just saying a spot that has these characteristics. So I wouldn't say I'm going to be picking your spots for you, but I am going to look at a map, and I'm going to show you what's underneath the water. And we are going to go into detail about that. And I'm going to talk to you about why these spots work for fluke. And my hope is, I heard all last year while I was off the water that it was just a terrible season inshore. And there were people saying the fish just weren't there. It's not true. They were there. They just weren't biting in their normal bite patterns. The temperatures were off, yes, but they still have to eat. So the question is, where are you going to find them? And, from there, once you find them, what are you going to do to piss them off enough to take a bite at your bait? And that's a whole different issue. What we're talking about today is finding the spots. So we're going to dive into that in just one moment. I do want to say this is a sponsored live stream and podcast now. So Great Bay Outfitters, if you're looking for anything kayak related, it's the shop that I use since the day that they opened. I made a purchase on that day. Didn't even need anything. Just loved Paul and the team there, and I just wanted to support him. So I made my first purchase on the first day on my way to the water. Had a good day that day, and met Paul and have had a good relationship with him, his staff, and the shop since then. So if you're looking anything kayak related, talking Old Town Native, other brands as well, swing by on Radio Road in Tuckerton. You can't miss it. It's right there on your way down to Great Bay. Just swing on in and see what they have to offer. They got it. If you need it, they've got it, or they can get it. So check that out. And also the second sponsor is me and my real estate business. I am a realtor in Pennsylvania, covering a lot of Pennsylvania. I was all the way from York County all the way up to Lehigh County today doing work. And if you have any real estate needs, buy, sell, invest. If you're an investor or you want to be an investor, that's one of my niches. Give me a call, reach out to me. My information was in the beginning of this. If you want to reach out, you can email me at richardnatoli@kw.com and we'll talk about it. And by the way, if you live in New Jersey, which a lot of you do, I can still help you there. Our team actually stretches over into New Jersey. We have a New Jersey team in Atlantic City, and they actually cover the entire state, people down in Cape May County, up north, all over the place. So if you have any needs, reach out to either of the two sponsors. And certainly for your kayak stuff, go local before you go to these big box stores. It's the local businesses that really support our fisheries and care about our fisheries and about you. If you think Dick's cares one bit about you and what you do on the water, you're wrong. They don't care. But Paul does. And, these other kayak shops is great. Support somebody in Florida. It's great if it's a small company. It's even better if it's a local company. So with that said, we're going to dive right into talking about how to find fluke spots. And we're going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to dive into this, and I'm going to tell you right now, I am typically a Navionics user. And I've always said Navionics is my go-to. And I unfortunately did not realize last year Garmin destroyed it. They absolutely destroyed the web access. Not only that, I went to update my fish finder. I can't find my Navionics card. So now I'm not sure. Maybe I switched to something else. So I don't have my normal interface for showing, the spots the way that I used to in the past, or showing the water and the depths and everything. So I'm going to be using something else. It's going to work just as well. It's the same information. It comes from the same spot, the same source, which is basically NOAA. But it's going to look a little bit different. So if it doesn't look the same as yours, it's still coming with the same information. It's still updated. So with that, let's get started, and we're going to talk, and I'm going to share my screen here, and let's talk about the biology. So for those that are waiting for opening day and waiting for the flounder to come in, I'm going to tell you right now, they are there. Not only are they there, but the big ones are there. So, you have a great shot early in the season to get these big fish. I'm talking the 25-inch plus for the backwater. So I'll call anything 25 plus in the backwater. I consider a backwater doormat. You can call it whatever you want. But to me, that's a really nice fish for the backwaters, and they are in now. You could fish for them. Don't keep them in New Jersey. I think New York, you can't. I think I got to check New York. I think it's the very beginning of May. I think it starts about 4 days before it does in New Jersey. Some states like Delaware, they don't even close. So I guess you could go back in there and start fishing tonight if you'd like, if that is still the case. But they are there. And it doesn't matter if the water temperature is 47 degrees like it was last week. I don't know if it still is right now. It doesn't matter if it's 70 degrees. They're still there. So don't let that kind of keep you from going out and hitting the water. But what you do need to know is it's going to impact where they are. And there are a couple things that are going to remain constant. The temperature is one of the big things that's variable that you have to adjust your approach for. So when you're fishing in the early season, one of the things that I will always recommend is try to go with the outgoing, assuming that you don't have some incredibly cold rain runoff draining into these back bay areas. If it's going to drop the water temperature on the outgoing, if the water coming out of the rivers is colder than the water coming in from the ocean, reverse it. Fish the incoming. You want to try to fish the warmer water. If you can fish a day that has sun, go shallower. They're going to go up and sun themselves in the shallower water to get a little bit more temperature into them. They're more comfortable at these higher temperatures. That's when they're in their prime feeding zone, and 47 degrees just doesn't cut it. But if we roll into the season and it's 47 degrees, you can still catch fish. They're still eating. They still need to live. They're not eating for convenience. They're eating to stay alive. So you got to keep that in mind. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Like I said, look for the shallows. They're still going to feed in the same types of areas, and look for the warmer water and what's going to lead to that. You can even look at things like wind. If you're going in real shallow areas and you have a warm wind on a cold water day, it's really cold water. A warm wind churning up anything against, sod banks or anything like that, even up against bulkheads, that will put a little bit more warmer water in because you'll have the heat exchange with the air. It'll actually heat up that water a little bit as the wind blows the top off of it. And that can actually increase the temperature as well. That's bigger for other species in our area, like weak fish. I would definitely look at that for weak fish, even striped bass a little bit. It can impact fluke as well, as long as it's shallow enough that they're going to be able to benefit from that heat exchange at the surface. A couple of things to keep in mind. They're always going to be looking, these fluke, they're always going to be looking for a few things when they're down there in the water. They are ambush predators. They are very, very aggressive fish, and they set up an ambush, unlike a bluefish that just kind of cruises around. The fluke will sit in a spot where it's going to have a predictable flow of bait into its face at any given time. And they just wait on the bottom, sitting in one spot, and they wait for the bait to come to them. When they see it, they'll pick up, they'll follow it, and then they'll decide whether or not it's a legit bait. That's where your presentation comes in. And then they'll bite it, they'll taste it, and see if they want to actually eat it. So you want to find a spot that's going to have some place where they can hide, that's going to bring a consistent kind of conveyor belt of food to them over time. So think about drop offs. Think about anything that breaks a current. So bridges are great. A lot of people don't fish bridges for fluke, but bridges are great. Around the pilings, you get those eddies. They can sit in those eddies and watch everything just stream by on the sides of them. If you're up in a flat, let's say it's cold water and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to go up in a flat. Well, they need somewhere to hide. So look for something that's a little deeper, maybe a depression or a pothole. And if you can find a pothole that has a little bit of a current coming through it, or it's right next to one of these channels in those flats, that's where you want to look. That's the type of area that's going to hold these fish. And it becomes more and more important as you start looking at the size of the flounder that you're targeting. So a couple of years ago, I think maybe it was even last year. Again, I was kind of out of touch last year, where we had that ridiculous slot, that's 17 to 18. So you actually had to target smaller fish. Well, that was much easier because you are targeting fish that don't necessarily have to be in the best spot, because you can be sure if there's a 25 or 28 inch fluke sitting somewhere and there's a best spot in that little general area, that fish is taking it. It's moving the others out. They're aggressive. It's going to come right in and it's going to take its spot and just kind of flush the small fish out to the sides. And you often see this during the summer when you're fishing and everyone's fishing the same channel, and you see everyone's pulling up shorts. Well, they're just missing the spot. Most likely they're not quite in the spot that's best. And you'll often see, this is where the kayak fishermen do really well. They'll get in tight to the structure and they'll actually fish the best spots, and they end up pulling up some bigger fish often, because a lot of people just aren't willing to bring their boats up against these hard structures on the sides. Bringing something up against a sod bank, you have a $100,000 boat. You don't necessarily want to risk the glass. A wake pushes you into it and all of a sudden you punch a hole in the glass. But keep that in mind. So they're looking for the best spot. The biggest fish are going to take that best spot from the smallest. So let's dive in. Let's look at a area. I'm going to zoom in on this map, and I'm going to tell you right now, this interface kind of doesn't work well. It's not like Navionics, which is nice and crisp and clean. This thing, you'll see different weird colors coming up from time to time as I zoom in. Just kind of bear with me on it because it's the best I have until I get this Navionics thing figured out. All right, so this is Ocean City right here, Ocean City, New Jersey. And I'm not telling you fish these spots. I'm just going to show you some things that are going to indicate what could be a good spot. And I'm not going to go through here in detail and say, but if I were fishing, I'd go right here. I'm just kind of telling you these are the characteristics that you need to look for. All right, so here's the shaded relief. So this shows what's on the bottom underneath the water. The water's all smooth, but underneath you can see there's some depth in here at the inlet. You can see it comes up shallow up in this section up in here. You can see another channel down here. So you can see all of these channels that are coming through here. Those are the deeper areas. As you zoom in, you can get a little bit more detail. And this is where it kind of messes up sometimes. So if it changes colors, don't worry about that. Just kind of think about the theme that we have here. I'm going to put the 1 foot contours on here so we can really see what's going on in there. And you can see some depths. I don't know if you can read it because of the colors, and there it's changing color. Now I'm not going to be able to read it either. So right where I am, it's about 23 feet, 20 feet up in here, 14 up in here. All right, so 14 feet down to 20 feet. This is an interesting spot. Now, it doesn't set up perfectly for both tides though, right? So if you have the incoming tide coming from right to left, look at what the water's doing and think about where it's going to funnel the bait fish. So if it's coming in here, it's coming in this deep water in this section here. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can still see a little bit. So this is the deeper water, and then it's going to push up and over this, right? So if it's going to push bait fish, it's either going to push it around the contour or it's going to push them up and over the top. Well, if it pushes it up and over the top, you can see it gets a little bit deeper back in here. So this back side, this little spot right in here, this little buckle, that would be where you'd most likely find these flounder sitting, because as the current comes in, it's a strong current. It's going to kick things up and over, or it's going to come straight through here and they're sitting back in here with a little bit of current relief. They're like any other fish. They don't want to burn a ton of calories when they're out there hunting for food. They just want to get a guaranteed meal. That's how they're surviving. So they're going to find someplace like this little buckle, and they're going to tuck themselves right on that seam of the current. So the current's going to be strongest in this section, and it's going to be a little bit less here as the water comes up and over. This is a spot where they'll sit. So when you're presenting to this one on the incoming, you're going to want to probably set up here and make sure you drift right along this drop off all the way down into this section and towards the back until it starts to rise again, and then just pick up and go back. You're probably not going to find things up in this 17-foot area up in here, but you are going to find them in this deeper spot here. And again, it's the current, it's the flow of the bait fish. It gives them a really good spot to set up and ambush when something comes through this way. The other thing on the incoming is if it's coming in and it's kicking down here, well, you have a little bit of one back in this section back here. Now, you don't have the real sharp change in depth that you have here. Let me zoom out and let's see if we can get that other color back. You can see it's like, see how it's dark? This means that all these 1 foot contour lines are really close together, which means that's a very severe change in depth, either positive or negative. So, it's going negative in this direction as it's getting deeper. It's going positive in this direction. Then it just drops off a ledge right here. So that's a good spot back in there that I just talked about. But you can see here, if the bait's coming in this way, it's kind of getting swept in this direction along this contour. You have this back here. And this is another good one on the incoming, because you're going to have things that will kick over the top, and it's not as drastic of a change. So you'll have actually more flow in there, but you'll have a little bit of relief down in this very bottom. And you can see what I was saying about the difference between spots, in an area where the little fish are and the big fish are. The big fish are probably right where this little icon is right now, right on that number. The little fish, look at how little I changed it right here. They're just right outside of that. They're not sitting in this best spot. So people say, "Oh, I pounded that area." Really? You did the same drift in the same exact spot over the same exact spots 17 times. You pounded that one drift. But you got to move. You got to move in. You got to move out. And you got to make sure that you get this whole thing, because this little area right here, you could probably go over this 15 times before you actually hit the best spot. So you got to make sure that you're really looking at your electronics. You're really working the area, and you're presenting those baits as you go through there so they look natural, so that you get something to actually take it and jump on it. So that's a good one. But here's a good point. Look at this spot on the outgoing. So the water's coming out of the shallow and it's dropping down into the deep. This is not necessarily the best spot for you to be looking, right? This one's actually pretty decent still, but you'd want to come up on this other side, which I didn't show. The incoming, it's over here on the right. The outgoing is going to be more over on the left. Doesn't mean you can't catch them over here. You can always catch them anywhere. And I would check all of them, but my first focus would be right on this drop here. You can see where it's kind of dark with all these contours. This is where the depth is dropping. It's going to be sitting here, maybe up at the top. So as something comes through, it's going to pick up, follow it down, and then pick it up down in this area. But you're going to get its attention here up at the top. In this section, it's okay, but I would actually be over on this section on the outgoing. Again, the tide is going from left to right, and it's coming down this drop. That's another good spot, down this drop. It's going to kick off this, and then you have this little backside here where you're going to have everything kind of spilling from this direction and kicking off around here. This spot right there, on that number 20, looks like it would be a good spot as well. So again, you kind of have the theme. A lot of people say this is one spot. This whole thing is one spot. It's not. This is one area. The spot is about as big as your lure, and you got to find exactly where you want to put your lure. And a lot of people have that misconception. You hear people that fish Avalon, right? So I fish Avalon, and I'm not blowing up a spot here because it's incredibly famous. It's called Patty's Hole in Patty Thoroughfare. And people say, well, I fished Patty's Hole. Okay, where? I mean, that is a big spot. It's not a spot. You have any area that's in there between 6 feet down to 35 feet. You have multiple buckles, you have multiple drops, you have multiple holes. Everyone just calls it Patty's Hole. Well, really, that's about a quarter of a mile that people call it that. But I've been out there a lot of times with people, the people in this chat, and we've been bailing fish out of there, and we're watching other people not, because they're not in the same spots. They're in the same area. We can talk to each other as they drift past, but they're not going over the same spots. They're not going over this. They're not going over this stuff that I'm circling right here. They're drifting right down the middle. And that's one of the big problems. That's one of the big problems where boat people can sometimes get lazy, and kayakers too. But let's just say fishermen can get lazy. You just set up for the longest, easiest drift. In this one, the longest, easiest drift is to come up here, right into this section, and just drift right down the middle. So if we go back to the point that these are ambush predators, which they are, that's a fact. It's not debatable. That's how they hunt. Where are they going to set up in here and surprise bait fish that come through? Right in this middle section. This right here is an absolute wasteland. It's just flat, and that's a pretty good distance. So, I brought it up on previous podcasts, in the past few years. If you were going to go play hide and seek in an NFL stadium, are you going to try to hide in the middle of the flat football field in the middle and think that you're actually going to do a good job? That's right here. You have this coming up to shallower. So this is the incline on the sides. This is where all the seats are. Or are you going to find a pocket like, behind the sideline where you can duck down? Like if it's a baseball stadium, let's say it's a baseball stadium, are you going in the dugout, which is right over here? Or are you coming back in the bullpen, which is right up in here? You're going to those spots if you're playing hide and seek. You're not sitting in the middle of the field saying, you can't find me. Yeah, we can. You're right there. Well, if you have to play hide and seek for your life, which a flounder has to basically do to survive and get food, they're not going to sit in the middle of the field either. They're going to find the spots that they're going to be able to camouflage themselves. They're going to be able to hide, and they're going to pick off a predictable flow of bait. And that's going to be in the seats. It's going to be in the dugout. It's going to be in the bullpen. It's going to be on the sidelines. It's going to be in the concession stands. It's going to be anywhere else but the middle of the field. This is the middle of the field. And this is all the people that come back complaining that all they caught are a bunch of 16-inchers, and they went through a ton of bait, but there were just no big fish there. Well, there were. They just weren't in this section that I'm circling. They were in this section right off to the side. They were in this section down here. They were in this section up here. That's where they were. They were there. You weren't. You were just in the same stadium. You were not in the same spot. You were not in the same section. That's why you didn't see them. That's why you didn't pick them up. So that's one example of the type of spot that you want to look for. And this one is just a basic drop off. Everyone that I talked about was on the edge of a drop off. It can be on the incline. It could be the top end of a drop off, or it can be on the bottom end. I prefer in an area like this where these are not really shallow in the springtime, I prefer to stay in the deeper part then. If they're not going to get a big temperature advantage by going shallow, they're probably going to stay deep in that consistent temperature where it's still comfortable and they can find a good ambush spot. Now, if this were 4 feet up here, yeah, they might be up in the 4 feet. And then you start looking at the structure up in the 4 feet section and the drop offs up there. So let's see, this depth is, this is actually 2 feet. And then it comes up, look at these. I mean, there's some nice drop offs there, a nice point there. But yeah, so the drop-offs like over here are the ones that I'm going to look for if you're fishing deeper water. That's just one of them. There are other places that you can look, and let me think of where I can find these. If you're not fishing docks, I mean, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. You definitely want to be fishing docks when you can. So let's just kind of come up towards Longport and look in here. And remember, the same things remain. The same principles remain. You need to find docks that are going to have current flow. Like, don't go back into the back bays. If you're in Stone Harbor, as an example, or Avalon, don't go back, or Sea Isle, don't go back in those back bays, where there's no current at all. The fluke are not sitting there unless there's a light on at night. Then maybe they will come in. But trust me, fishing lights as a little kid, I think we caught 2 flounder the entire time fishing lights in a bay that had absolutely no flow. But these, you can see in Longport, they do have flow. It's right next to the inlet. But the question is there a good spot for them to set up and for them to ambush? And let's take a look at this. Let's put the 1 foot contours. Let's look at the depths. All right, you got 4.5 feet up here, 16 feet maybe down in here. I can't really read that. I'm sure you can't either looking at this. But you can see here's an interesting bit of structure right here. So it kind of kicks out. This is shallow up in here. if you've ever fished this area, you know this is shallow. But then there are docks that are in here. So you can see there are docks up in this section up here. If we put the satellite, so there you can see the satellite. So you can see where the docks come out. You can see the contours under the water. This actually doesn't set up great because these docks are in such shallow water. These actually have a little bit of a depth break here. So think about this. You have these pilings on these docks sitting down here. And I would say this one is not ideal. I probably wouldn't fish these, but it's a good example to bring up. Look at how these contours are here. So you have a drop off in depth. You have these pilings. And if you have the current coming in on this one, it's coming from bottom left up towards top right in this direction. You have a drop off here right behind a piling. There's a piling, there's a piling because it's a corner. There's a piling right under here. So you're going to have a nice current coming through, a nice drop in depth, and that's going to push the bait up against the piling and around. So they can sit in less current, less flow. They have to fight less in order to hold their spot. And the bait, the food is basically going to come to them. And when I say bait, I'm not necessarily saying it's pushing schools of minnows or killies or anything to them. That's not necessarily what I'm saying, but it will kind of influence the directions that some crabs will go. Anything that kind of washes out of these shallows will kind of get washed down and into the deeper part. So I'm not saying like these currents are strong enough to push actual fish all over the place. It can influence where they go, but they're going to look for where those easy meals are coming through. If you're back in the sod banks and the marshes, grass shrimp will definitely go into certain areas and kind of get pushed along, and they're just going to wait for them and they're going to feed on them. So this is another one. So if you take a look at this, and let me just get these contours back on in the shaded part, you can see where right here, there was that piling right in this section here. The water's coming bottom left to top right. It's going to kick off that piling. And then in the back side, probably up in here, you're going to have a good spot for these fluke to sit. And then you have the warmer water up here too, which wouldn't hurt. But again, it's incoming, so maybe it's not going to be that hot. It's going to be coming directly in from the inlet. But on the outgoing, if we throw this on again, let's see if I can find one real quick. I mean, look at this dock here. This is great. This dock is good. Think about this on the outgoing. The water is coming from the top right down towards the bottom left, 20 feet of depth there, right up against the beach area there. And you've got all these pilings, and then look at this. There's a buckle, right? So on the incoming, actually, I would fish this backside right here where it gets deep. So the water kicks off of all this and around. This is another good spot. The outgoing is a little bit tougher in this area for what I would really be looking for a dock. But you can see what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a spot that's going to have a little bit of current relief right next to current, right next to a drop off. And with a dock, you're always going to have that structure there. And you can use that as a current break here. And look at this. Okay. So here's one, there's no dock, but you can see this change right here, this mound. It looks like a mound of lines. So you have this depth change and real shallow water up top. So you're going to have the water just kind of kicking off this and kind of deflecting the current a little bit. On the outgoing, as it goes top right to bottom left, it's going to kick off around there. You're going to have a little eddy. You may not even see it, but down below, down on the bottom, you're going to have a little eddy back in there. A great spot for a fish to sit. Really good depth at 14 feet, 14 and a half feet. Right back in this section is an area that I would 100% look. Again, I wouldn't necessarily make it my primary spot for the day, but that's a good spot to look for the outgoing tide as things are kind of swept off to the side and over the top. But you can see there's a 4-foot difference in depth between the deepest part here and these lines that are coming out here. Up here, it's only 10 and a half feet, and it's down to 14 and a half here. So this section right in here is going to set up pretty well for you. So that's another one. Oh, and here's a marina. Marinas are always difficult because people want to fish marinas. But look at what we have here. We have this wall. You're not going to have a lot of current in there, so be very careful about spending time in there. I actually wouldn't fish that one. There are some areas out here that I would fish. I mean, you can see look at this right in here. This looks pretty decent on the outside of it, 17 and a half feet. So water's coming down. You'll get a little bit of kickoff there, but this is another one of those wastelands. It's just dead flat. It's dead flat in here. There's not much going on, but you do have something going on over here. where you can take advantage of the water flow from 5 feet down to this 17 feet down in here. So there's little spots in there that you could look at, but I would actually avoid that one specifically. Now a bridge, here's a bridge real close. I've never looked at this bridge. I shouldn't say I've never looked at this. I've actually fished it. All right, so look at this. So here's what you're looking for. These lines close together. You're going to have the drop off there. Now you have this wasteland over here, this like really flat section. You got a flat section here, but you have a drop. So you can take advantage of that drop, and they'll sit on the back side of that, or on the incoming as it's coming up in this direction. They could sit right at the top here. And as things are compressed from, 16 feet of depth or whatever, 16 to 18 feet down in this section, as the water comes up from there, it accelerates up this and over, and it gets into this 5-foot area. So a lot of stuff is going to get pushed up and over top, and this could be a good spot for them to sit. Now, 5.5 feet, a lot of people won't fish for fluke in that. You should, though. You should. If the conditions present themselves like this, especially if you have wind also blowing in this direction, I would definitely set up on this side. Always start ahead of the structure, drift the structure, and then drift past the structure. Because remember, fluke follow for a long time before they strike sometimes. So set up ahead, drift through and up and over and back into this section. It's another good area to pick up. So if anyone wants to throw in the chat a specific area, I'll see if I can find something in that area that is interesting, or a certain type of structure. I can go pretty much anywhere in New Jersey. I've done a lot of New York, a lot of Connecticut, a lot of Delaware, a lot of Maryland. I can just kind of go through and see what we can find. One of the areas that people will look at when you're looking at things like this, let me just find down in here, come down to Stone Harbor. You look at the sounds, like people want to go back and fish the sounds, right? So you can go back to them, use any one as an example. So here's one, Richardson Sound. And you take a look at that, and a lot of people think there's not much going on. But when you look at these contours, you can see there actually is a lot going on. So let's say it's really cold water. It's what I think I saw in the chat. It was 52 degrees. Well, that's pretty cold. But if you come back in here on a sunny day, this 5 feet, that's going to heat up. It's 5 feet here, 5 feet there, 4 feet there. So you want to find on the outgoing, where is this water coming out? And where's it coming out over a depth change? And you can see some spots here. Well, this gets down to 17 feet. So if the water is coming out, you got to find the closest inlet. Where's that water going to go? It's probably going to go up towards Hereford. In this case, it's going to come in this direction. Look for the spots in there where it's going to fall off and into that deeper water. So right down in here, it's going to come down in this, out from this direction, 5 feet, 13 feet. Down in here is a decent area. I would actually pull up tighter and fish that 5.5 to 7 foot, and then drift down and take this big drop down to 17 feet. So you take advantage of everything coming out of this nice warm 4.5 foot water coming out into here. You also have this channel in here where it's coming out at 7.5 feet. So it's going to come out of here. It's all going to fall into this, and that's deeper. It's going to get a nice flow to it. So where's that going to come out, and where's it going to go? It's going to come out in this direction. It's going to go north. So maybe the backside of this underwater point. You can't see this unless you have Navionics, unless you have a fish finder, but there is an underwater point right here, which will naturally break the current. And you have this little tiny buckle in it right back in here. So right in this section is a good way to go, where you're coming out of this 7, drops towards that 17 feet. So this back section there. All right. So I saw Corson's Inlet. So let me see if I can find Corson's on here real quick. Here's Corson Inlet. Corson Inlet it's difficult in my opinion, but there are so many spots that you can check in here. If you've ever driven your boat in here, you know why it's difficult. And look, you can see the contours are actually going over the land here. So this is not the best. It's saying it's 4.5 feet deep there, and it's showing on the image that there's sand. So let's just take that out. Let's just say it looks like this. All right. So you come in Corson Inlet, you somehow make it through the breakers. You're coming into this section here. And this is the first one that everybody sees and everyone tries to fish because it's deep, right? It's deep with some structure in it. Like in this section, let me zoom in. Right in this section here, you can see like that's the deepest spot. But look at this right over here. This is your ledge. I mean, that's a pretty good ledge where you're going to go from deep 19 feet, and then it's going to come up real fast, and you'll see all the boats lining this area when it's further into the summer. This section in here is going to be decent. The problem that you have is that the water is coming straight down in either direction. You get a little bit on the incoming of a kick off of this underwater point here. So maybe the backside of here is good, or down in this, because you have this big change here down in this section. But this looks good, but you're not going to have great ambush spots, because even though you have a ledge here, the ledge isn't helping. Nothing's coming up or down that ledge. It's just going straight down. It's kind of like a runway. It's just a runway right there. Now on the outgoing, you do have this part up here where it drops down from 5.5 feet or whatever that is, 6.5 feet down into this section. This is a good spot at the very start. It gets kind of bland and just kind of flat. This is good here. You can actually see this steps down. So it comes from shallow to a little bit deeper, a little shelf, a little bit deeper, another shelf, a little bit deeper, and all the way down. This is probably on the outgoing tide your best area to go, to fish this structure right in here. I would not fish any of this back in here. This is almost worthless. This is where this is the nursery. This is where the little fish are going to be. And you can see one of the problems with coursing is a lot of people fish from shore. Let me throw the satellite back on. They'll pull their car or truck over and they'll start casting from here. Well, the problem that you have is, look at what you're casting into. Not much. There's not much there. If you go up near the bridge, and you can deal with the guys that don't want you near them because they fish there every day and they think they own it. Well, they're not catching a ton. You got this little section here, right where the boats and jet skis go. You got this little section here, and you got this one over here, which is really full of snags. But it can be a good spot depending on the tide. I actually fish incoming this back section. I don't fish it outgoing because you'd have to come up in the shallow part, and I just have never done anything well there. The bridge down here, though, can be good. So if you come down, and just so that people are aware, here's your bridge at Bay Avenue. The bridge can be good because you have in this section, especially up in here where you have all these contour lines, you have all the pilings going down in there. So it's going to give you some structure that they can hide behind. So this is an example where you take a basically flat area. And if I zoom out, you can see it better. I mean, this is pretty flat. There's not much going on in there. But once you throw in that structure of those supports for that bridge, well, then now you have structure. Now you have ambush points that are set up for them. So this is a good example of where you can take just bland bottom that is really unremarkable and shouldn't really produce a ton of great fish. And once you throw those pilings in there that are supporting that bridge, now you have structure. Now you have ambush points, and now you can find the fluke on the backside. You can also find sheep's head and tog in here if you haven't tried it. I wouldn't suggest doing much on this other bridge up here. The guys fishing above you will just get pissed off at you. So be careful in there. Around Corsins, I mean, there are some really good spots. If you want to go back super shallow, you can come back in this section. But look at what you get when the water comes out of these. Look at right here. You have a nice drop in this section right here. So you have all of this structure. And again, it's a little bit protected on the outgoing, the water coming straight top to bottom, and it's coming straight down in this way. Well, guess what? You have your current break underwater right there. This is another good section to be looking. You're going to have to fight people to get that spot. I'm telling you that right now. And then you have another one back in here. And this is a good one because, yes, you do have the outgoing coming left to right, but you also have it coming from top to bottom and then swinging off to the right. So as it comes down and kicks around here, you have this back section in here, which can be okay. That's another area that I might check. Again, I wouldn't plan a trip for that spot though. So that's Corsins. Those are some decent ones. If you want to go out of Corsins, there are some things offshore. I mean, you can see the structure out here. There are things that you can go to without having to go super far and look for wrecks. Everyone thinks once you break the inlet, you got to go forever. You don't. There are things that are in close that you can do. I mean, just look at the structure in here. I mean, there is structure, and these will hold fluke. If you don't think so, talk to anybody who catches them on the beaches. They're probably setting up out there and then coming in. So let's go a little bit more north. Brigantine. God, I could spend 7 weeks on Brigantine alone. You have Great Bay. I think Paul had mentioned Little Sheep's Head Creek. I don't know if I'll say specifically Little Sheep's Head, but let's kind of look at the area so that people can see just basically what you have up in that area. If you're not familiar with where we are, so you have Mystic Island right here, and then you can look down in here. You've got all these creeks in here, Little Sheep's Head, and so on and so forth, like right here. There are some good spots in here, and this is one that people don't think. They don't think that there's going to be a lot of fluke in there. I was catching them in March a couple of years ago. The last March I was on the water in this all through here, actually. All through this sec, not up in here. Don't try to go up in here unless it's changed in the last year. You'll. I don't care if you're in a kayak, you're going to get grounded. But let's take a look at, let's say right here, on the other side of Whirlpool, and you can see there is some structure here, and you got some nice depth. Yeah, it's not showing the depth that I remember there, so I don't know if it's changed or not. Let's just say it's changed. But that's like 20 feet. That's not 4 feet. That was like 15 to 20, and I've got the video to prove it. But this section, as an example, is pretty good on an outgoing, as you're getting the water coming from right to left and top to bottom and around to the left around this point. There is a deeper section here. Again, ignore the, you know what, I'm going to turn off the depths because it's not right. That's actually not what it looks like. If this is the spot I'm thinking. So you have a shelf here. Okay, so it's shallow up in this section that I'm circling. It's shallow basically down in this section here. And then you have this gully right here, and it does stick out, and you have these little underwater points here. So if you're fishing this on the outgoing, you're going to tuck around on this side, come around this point and fish this back section. There is an incline. There is a drop off there. Okay, so Paul is saying it hasn't changed. So I'm correct. The chart is wrong. Yeah, so it's probably still 15, 20 feet deep in this section. And that, by the way, the further you get into the marshes, the less accurate these get. So always keep your fish finder on. They are very important, not for finding fish, but for finding structure and depths. And you will see there are creeks. I'm not going to show you in this because some of them I'm just not going to share. There are creeks that we've already passed over as I was scrolling the map that go from 4 feet down to 30 feet. And talk about a great spot for flounder. Mostly little ones because there's not a ton of water flow going through there. But if you ever want to have fun and you find one of those, you can just be bailing them all day, and you'll get some keepers in there too. But on this one, again, it's going to be shallow up in this section, and you're going to have that drop. So as the water's coming through, it gets shallow and it pushes over and then it drops. And this used to kick out and come back up a little bit. So you had this little section. Actually, I'm going to put the crosshairs right on it. It used to be that there was a little hook here and it came up around this point. So the water coming straight on was kicking off there as the water coming from the top was flowing downhill to here. It all comes together at this crosshair and to the left. And this is it. This is your spot. Start up in the shallow or right around this point, but you got to make sure that you position yourself to come back inside and drift down through here. That's where your bigger fluke are going to be sitting. I've also caught some, there's also a little bit of one here, but it's such a severe drop off that you just, on the outgoing, you can just take advantage of that because as the water's coming down on the outgoing, remember, it's coming down and hooking left. And then you have all this flow coming here over the shallows and dropping down right there. I've caught 20 plus inches in here, in this section here. So it's something to look at. Really good structure. That's a Little Sheep's Head. There are also good spots out here. Let's see if it's better once we get out of. No, there's channels here, man. There's better channels than this is showing. Yeah, there's no way I was fishing 4 feet of water there. Yeah, so look at Whirlpool Point. There's good depth in here. The problem with this is you have to stay tight. Otherwise, unless you go right up against this real shallow part here, you have to stay tight in here. Boats are not going to want to do that. I wouldn't do that with a boat. This creek offers very little as far as a benefit for fishing it. But if you come down off a Little Sheep's Head, you do get a benefit of that all exiting out into here, down in this section on the outgoing. You have the benefit when it's coming in, kicking off this point into this section up in here. So again, you can kind of see the theme of what I'm going for. There's There's you're looking for the current breaks, but you can't just look visually because we're not fishing southern waters. Now, if some of you actually, I know that there are people in South Carolina, for example, in North Carolina that watch this. You have a different type of approach. Your deep waters are not what we're talking about here. You're not fishing 20 feet typically. You're fishing 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet, and you may be able to see the current breaks. But when you're talking mid-Atlantic and up north, our current breaks are underwater for the most part. You can see signs up top, especially if there's a bridge or something like that. But a lot of times you have to use these charts and you have to identify what's going to change the currents way down deep near the bottom. Because while you can catch fluke up near the top, for the most part, 99.9% of the time, their ambush is on the bottom. And they really only come up, very infrequently to the surface. And that's usually, under 5 feet where they're up at the surface feeding. And they will do that every once in a while. If you see that, you can actually catch them on poppers. But it's going to be extremely rare. I don't know why they're doing it, to be honest with you. That's one part of their behavior I didn't look at, but you got to look for the underwater current. So you have to be able to visualize if the current is coming here, what's going to divert it. And it could be something as small as a small rock, just a little piece of sod that broke off and is laying out in the current. The back side of that is going to have that current break. The front side is going to get pummeled. So stay away from the front side and get to the back side and try to figure out where is that current seam. If you're really experienced and you're really good and you know your tackle and you're used to using it, won't necessarily work very well with a new rod that you're not familiar with, but you'll be able to feel when your bucktail or whatever you're dropping is in the current or falls out of the current. And if you can kind of stay along that edge, that's the sweet spot. They're going to sit right on the edge or right outside of the main current, and then they're going to dive out into the current to get that stuff that comes by. So that's a little sheep's head. Can do one more. Okay, Stone Harbor 96th Street Bridge area for David Cohen. I'm going to do this one, and I'm glad that you brought this one up because this is one of the first bridges I've ever fished. Grew up with the house in Stone Harbor. So 96th Street Bridge was always one that we went to. 96th Street Bridge is interesting. I'm going to tell you right now, you are not allowed to fish from this bridge on this north side at all. However, at night, there's a little shack down here where the bridge operator stays. Sometimes, most of the time, they will let you. Just be very careful. You got Fred's Tavern right here, and you got other bars up in there. People will sometimes come out after drinking. It can get dangerous, but this is a great flounder bridge. If you want to catch fluke at night, this is where you want to go. If you have a boat, if you have a kayak, and you're comfortable out there on the water at night, fish this bridge. It is absolutely outstanding. I've caught more fluke under this bridge at night than any other spot I've ever fished cumulative over my lifetime. Yeah, at night. It's just a great spot to go. So let's see if this actually gives us some good contours. It does. Okay. It's a little inaccurate. This actually comes up a little bit further shallow in this section. By the way, great weak fish spot right here. But you can see you have the main part of the bridge right here. I don't fish here. I fish this section up in here. And you do have some depth there, and you do have these pilings that come down. You can see one right there. You can see one right there, 25 feet of water. You can see the depth changes. If you're fishing this, I would fish it at night, mainly because the lights on this bridge are great, and it gives a really sharp shadow line. So they will sit in the dark, not in the light. So they will sit in the dark area. So what you do is, let's say it's incoming tide, so it's coming from the bottom left up towards the top right. I would cast all the way out to here. I would not expect to catch anything. Nothing, as just follow my cursor. Nothing. And then once it hits here, this is where you're going to catch them, because you're going to lose the light. It's going to be a very sharp, dark area, and let your bucktail go under the bridge all the way out to this section. You'll probably pick something up in here in this section. That's how you fish it at night. And the other side is actually better at night. So if they let you and you're willing to brave the traffic, you can fish over here. There's a walkway that's guarded behind a wall. Over here, there is not on the north side. But if you want to fish that and they let you, this is actually better. It sets up better for you. You have better structure. You fish it that way. And the way that you do it, I'm just gonna give this tip and then I'll talk about the specific lines and how they kind of work for you. When you're fishing at night from a bridge and you're casting up, you cast up current, you let your bucktail, and I would use a bucktail and I would put if you don't even need to have a gulp bait on there, just put on like the old traditional pink zoom, let it drop to the bottom. And all you have to do, you're not jigging it. You're just letting the current sweep it towards you. You're just bringing in a little bit of line to keep tension. Every once in a while, don't jig it up off the bottom. Just kind of like flick your wrist a little bit. You want it to move maybe 2 or 3 inches, and you just want to keep it moving. That's it. That's all you're doing. Once it gets under this bridge, now you have to start like paying a little line out, but maintain contact with the bottom and start little jigs. And I'm talking maybe 3 or 4 inch movements of your hand. And once it hits that real black, it gets into the darker area and then it gets black. That's where you're typically going to pick them up. And you can pick up some huge ones on any bridge that has good lights and good shadow lines. If it's all lit up on both sides and the water is all lit all over the place, it's not a good bridge. But if it's one that has good shadow lines, like the lights are on just one side and they're shining across and you can see that black line in the water, those are the ones that you want to look for. And keep in mind, you still want the structure. So there's not a ton of structure here. So you want to kind of stay close to those pilings. So when it comes down, you want to be lined up right off to the side of the piling and let your bait go right down the side of it. You risk some snags, but you also risk catching better fish. So that's where you want to do for that bridge. Now, as far as Fluke, I actually do not fish this bridge for Fluke. It just doesn't set up well enough, and you can see exactly why. You have these contours here. I don't think those are accurate, if I'm being honest with you. I've never noticed that. And I fish this with my kayak quite a bit. I wouldn't fish this bridge actually if I'm going for Fluke. It's just there's just not enough depth change there. There are a lot of Fluke, but they're little guys because there's nothing to draw a big guy in here except for the bridge itself. So, if you want to do that, you want to get up real tight and fish real tight to it. Yeah, absolutely. I would try that. But if you're just looking for an area where there are a lot of different places to go, the only places to go, again, this is an area, not a spot. The spots are going to be this piling, this piling, this piling, too shallow. You're not going to get anything over here, most likely. So that's really the only thing that you have, and you got all these people coming through the bridge all the time. So, and you're going to have to battle the sheep's head guys if you're fishing this pilings. So I wouldn't fish this one. You can see why. There's just not enough contour to make it something that's really worth it. And I'll just do one last jump. I'm going to show you Patty's Hole, which I mentioned before, for people that are not familiar with it. So you have Townsend Inlet, and then you come through here, and there's Patty's Hole. This section in here, Patty Thoroughfare. This entire section is what people will call Patty's Hole, all down in here. And it's because it can get pretty deep, 25, 30 feet. It used to be a little bit, actually, yeah, it used to be deeper than that. And people say that this is the hole right here. Well, what did we just talk about? Crappy spot. This right here is a wasteland. So, you see a lot of people fighting for this. They go around the markers and they think, oh, this is the hole. This is where I got to be. It's Patty's Hole. Yes, it is. And Patty's Hole is not the spot. That's the area. So where you're going to want to pull, and I'll show you one specific spot right here. I have a video from a tournament. I fished right up in here and took this drop. There's actually, again, these maps are way off. This should be way up tight. Just envision all of this pushed in right up against the sod. Okay. So this 1.5 foot, that's like touching right here. This drop right here, it's this far across from this 1.5 foot, but it moves all up together. So if we could just slide the imagery down, then it would be accurate. So fishing this exact spot, the water is coming out on outgoing from up in here, and it comes down this shallow. And again, pretend the sod is right here. Actually, let me just change the layer so you won't even see it. We'll make it shaded. All right, so we don't see the sod. Sod is here. I'm fishing right here, and I had a full live spot on there, and I pulled in 24, no, no, 23 or 22 incher right in the drop. I think it was actually right here in this section. So again, the water's spilling over the top, and it was sitting right there, just sitting right there. Tad, I think, was with me when I did that one, when I caught that one. He's in the chat. There were a couple of people, and I was done. I had my fish for the tournament, and I just started telling people just fish exactly where I am, and they started catching keepers there too. And it was this. It wasn't Patty's Hole. It wasn't a big area. All the boats were out here. A bunch of kayaks were out here, and we were sitting up here. Almost, when you catch the fish, we were bumping into the sod, and this is where they were. It's just these little buckles in here on the backside. There's another buckle right there on the backside. Look, right here's another one. Here's another one. Those are the spots at Patty's Hole. It's not that hole that had nothing going on. You can see right here, there's some structure. There's some drops here. So think about the incoming. The water's coming down into this little gully. Right up in here is where it's first coming down. That's another good spot. So there you go. So that's basically where I'm looking for. So I know this is kind of like chaotic mayhem. I could get a little bit more organized. I just wanted to see if this was a topic that people were interested in. For those on the podcast, listening on the Audible, I do suggest that you come onto YouTube and watch the video if you really want to see it, but you should get the principles. Ambush predators are looking for a consistent flow of bait into a specific area. They need some structure to hide in, whether that's a depth change, whether it's boulders, whether it's a collapsed sod bank, it could be a bridge piling, it could be a dock piling. They need some structure that they're going to be able to hide behind. And as that comes through in a predictable area, the bigger fish, which have pushed the smaller fish out, are going to kind of dominate. And they're going to be the ones that are going to be in these best spots. So make sure that you don't be a lazy fisherman unless you just want to go out and hang out. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with just going out and saying, look, I just want to get some tight lines. I don't care how many I catch. I'm not keeping anything anyway. I just want to have consistent action. Well, then you don't have to necessarily only focus on the spots that I told you. The spots that I've been focusing on are the things that are 18, 19, 20 plus inch targets. So if you're looking for fish that size, these are the spots that I target. I'm not sitting out in the middle of the channel. It's very rare that a boat is going to almost hit me because I'm not where the boats want to be. I'm where the boats don't want to be. I'm where the guys with trolling motors that know what they're doing are really nudging up in there, and they're wincing every time a wake comes through because they're afraid that they're going to break off on something because it's getting shallow and they're right on a drop off. Those are the kinds of spots that you want to look for. And as you can see, as I'm scrolling through here, you can see several in here. But it's not the vast majority of Patty's Hole. It's just not. There's just nothing in this section here, except for little fish. You'll catch a lot of little fish in there. All right, so that's the first one. I can do more of these. I can talk very specifically and break down a specific type of spot. I can show you how to find them. If you're interested, I'd like to hear from you if there are any specific areas you'd like me to cover. Again, I'm not necessarily going to go out and give specific spots. Patty's Hole is fine because that's been a spot for 50 years, over 50 years. It's always been famous. Anyone that's been down in that area knows about it. There's always, big fish pulled out of there every year, and there always has been since I was a little kid. So that's not a spot. If you don't like it, tough. I don't care. And the other thing is you can't get there by land. So I'm not screwing over the land fishermen, which is another reason why I'm very comfortable talking about this one specific spot. All right. So everyone, thank you again for tuning in. I will be back next week. We're going to have Robert Lombardi on. If you haven't seen his book, man, this is a dude that went through basically the entire Chesapeake Bay, just exploring and fishing and catching fish and documenting his entire journey throughout there. Bob is a guy that I fished with a couple times. Great guy, just a wealth of knowledge. He is the guy that you want to talk to if you're just looking to get out on the water in the Chesapeake. He can tell you basically about anything out on the water. So he's going to be on next week. 7:30 on Monday. And remember, if you need anything for your kayak, get out there to Great Bay Outfitters. If you need anything real estate related, give me a call. Give me an email, richardnatoli@kw.com. If you want my phone number or website, that's all in the intro to this. richardnatoli.com is the thing. I'm just going to make people work for the phone number. So go and look at the intro if you really want my phone number. Yeah, but actually, I guess if you're a podcast listener, you can feel free to text me regardless. That's all good. So we'll be back next week. Everyone, thank you again for coming by. Sorry if I missed some questions in there. I'll do better next time. And until next week, get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines.